welcome to this episode of Barbells and Bourbon. We are sort of on a streak. We aren't on the
Yeah,
same
we
time
messed
frame,
it
but
up a
we're
little
we're
bit, but
yeah, we're good. We
I'm
ran
still on
into
a good
some
track.
yeah, we're still trending in the right direction. Um, as usual, we'll go through what everybody's potentially drinking since it is a Wednesday night and we're doing this. But this was my excuse to bust something out, so we'll do that. And then the topic tonight is publish or perish. Came up with this idea off of a Freakonomics radio episode that was talking about academic fraud and how rampant it is. And they focus more specifically on kind of the public science realm. It was a lot of Ivy League schools out east that they were kind of talking about. But also knowing and kind of casual conversations we've had, there's definitely been some questionable research in the exercise science and performance
Oh,
realm in the past and conversations we've had. So first, we'll go around what everybody's drinking. Andy,
I've got Kona Big Wave.
I love
Shout
it. I
out
saw
to
that. That's great.
yeah, shout out to my roommate for finding a 12 pack on sale. Um, it's reliable. It's definitely not my favorite beer, but
It's enough flavor, but not ultra
yeah, I mean
heavy.
it's certainly better than it's miles ahead of like a Coors, Bud, uh, Miller Lite. I would give it like 6.5 out of 10, or a 3.5 glasses.
There you go.
Hmm.
AJ, I didn't see you have anything tonight, but you also got done coaching basketball.
Yeah, I
So
was just gonna say I went with the Dr. Pepper Zero right after practice, so that's my beverage of choice. It's delicious. I go with the cherry flavor.
that one's free, Dr. Pepper. We'll hit you up later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'd totally take a sponsorship from them.
I don't argue that at all. So I busted out a bottle of Willet straight rye whiskey. This
Hey,
was a gift, I believe, from friend of the pod, Dr. Jake Erickson. Um, Super
Who
good
dat?
rye. Yeah, who's that? Small batch. So, always a good thing. So hadn't gotten it out in a while, so we thought that would be a good one.
mm-hmm.
So just jumping into the topic.
No, wait. The one
Oh, hold
thing
on.
I haven't even shown my
Oh,
mother this, but
4.5 out of 5. And then, ooh,
Look at
Andy
that.
with his degree.
Fancy.
the
Love
most
it, love
expensive
it.
piece of paper I've ever bought in my life.
There
Yeah.
you
But I
go.
figured
I
I'd show the
said,
pod.
as you said, be careful of that thing. Put it in a frame or something.
Yeah, I can't afford that. Have you seen what those cost now?
Or at least
It's gonna
laminate
cost.
it then.
It's
Sad
gonna cost
story.
me
I'm
like
not sure where my undergrad or graduate degrees are physically located. Think they're at
mine
my
are literally
parents'
right
house,
there.
but not positive where they're actually at.
Yeah, mine are on the walls.
Yeah, I don't mine aren't
Mine
back. I
are
don't
in
have
my
walls to put them
closet,
on.
and then my high school diploma is on display at a bar in Fort Worth, Texas.
Nice.
As it should be.
That's how you cement yourself in history.
Anyways,
All
launch it
right.
off, Joel.
Yeah, jumping in. So I just thought it would be interesting for people to potentially hear who aren't in academia. And even I loosely know this, but AJ has kind of gone through some of the process. Andy, you've seen it adjacently, but one of the pressures that can definitely be, from what I've gathered, in the publish or perish is the opportunity to try and achieve tenure. And as far as AJ, it might be different from institution to institution, but depending. But if you wouldn't mind just giving a little rundown of what that looks like and just kind of the pressure, real or perceived, to do that, to achieve that is, I think would be a good starting off point.
Yeah, the process of obtaining tenure and being on a tenure track position is definitely very different from institution to institution, and even within an institution, some of the departments themselves or the colleges within the university will even have their own requirements as well, because
Why not?
disciplines some disciplines, the types of projects that they do in the publication process, everything just takes a lot longer sometimes than others. So I think they have to modify things to keep it a little bit more realistic or just kind of equal across the different disciplines. But I would say the biggest difference is the level of institution. So if you're at an R1, kind of a higher level research institution, the tenure requirements are going to be significantly higher than a comprehensive or a liberal arts type university, for the most part, that doesn't necessarily have a high amount of graduate programs, graduate students. And as a result, usually the teaching loads are a lot higher at those types of institutions. And so usually as a result, then the research expectations and requirements will go down quite a bit if you have a higher teaching load. But generally, the process would be some type of annual review that would kind of consist of how many publications that you have. Sometimes you get higher level of credit for being a first author on those types of publications. Sometimes they'll also consider the impact factor of the journal that you're publishing in, or they may factor in citation metrics and some of those types of kind of statistics that you can pull from people's publication histories. And so I would say the primary focus is usually how many papers do you have and how many grants are you bringing in are kind of the overarching themes. And then beyond that, in terms of how many would be expected or how much money or what types of grants, that will definitely just come back to what level of institution are you at. And then because I was even going to think of the publisher parish, I think is a pretty common phrase that they use to describe that, where if you're not publishing, you're likely not going to get tenure and, maybe not meet your annual reviews and be put on probation or whatever they're going to call it. But I would think another term that is almost just as appropriate is the funded or fired type of saying, where at an R1, I think it's probably more contingent on grant funding and securing something like an R01 NIH type grant than it is coming down to publications. I think most people can pretty easily hit that low benchmark of getting enough papers in, especially in today's world. I think that's unfortunately easier than it ever has been, for better or worse. Some people take advantage of that, but I think the publication part is a lot easier. It's the grant funding that is a much bigger hurdle to overcome, especially in R1, if that's the expectation. And I think that is where people probably fall short on if they don't make tenure. The most would be just not bringing in big money projects or landing a big, federal type grant of some kind. But at every other institution that's not an R01, they probably don't have any of those grant requirements in. It'll be that's great if you can, but we're not going to fire you if you can't bring in NIH type money. And then there they might have more of a publication focused threshold where you got to get 1 or 2 papers every year or something, or a certain amount of first author versus middle author or co-authorship. And again, if it's a teaching institution, those requirements are going to be really, really low. And most times if you're not, or if you're just doing something, even presenting or getting your name on an abstract, a paper or 2 throughout a 6 to 7 year cycle, you could probably get tenure with just that kind of research activity, assuming that you're teaching evaluations and service and all the other requirements that are more secondary. As long as those are kind of in line, most people probably don't have a problem getting it at that level of university or school. So like that's kind of the general structure, I guess, of a tenure track path and what is often required. So like for an example, at UWL in the exercise and sports science program.
Yeah, this is what I'm going to get into and ask for, because I know the UIUC teaching loads and appointments.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like the UWL teaching load is considered a 4-4, so most faculty are teaching 4 3-credit classes every semester, and then because of that, the research expectations are, I think, really, really low. So if you literally get 2 publications in a 6-year period, you would have enough to get tenure, whereas some other institutions, they would want 2 a month or something, 2 a quarter.
Does UWL do a percentage based research teaching service appointment? Yeah. Do you remember what it is?
Oh, somewhere around like 60 30 20 maybe, or 50.
So along those lines,
50, 30,
if you UWL like 4-4 is pretty standard, right? But it goes higher than that. Am I correct?
At UWL.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
But we're pretty standard for like an R3, which is if people aren't aware, an R1 is like a primarily doctoral program. An R2 is either a mix of doctoral and masters or kind of a mix of teaching and research institution. And then an R3 is a teaching institution that can do research because typically they have institutional review boards and such. So something like where I just graduated from University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, that's an R1. Where all of us met, University of Wisconsin La Crosse is an R3. And you were teaching a 5-4, weren't you?
Yeah, and that was because people had left, so we had to be overloaded because they had classes that need to be taught. But
so at University of Illinois, the standard appointment for a tenure track professor is a 1-2. And pretty easily, most people buy out of one course at least. So either 1-1 or 0-2. And the appointment is 40-40-20 teaching research service. And arguably that's not exactly reflective of kind of what people end up being appointed to. Some people really enjoy service, so they get on a lot of committees and such. But in our department's a little weird because we were very well funded by undergraduate dollars, and our administrative staff is different. They have a different focus than most R1s. I don't want to step in any dog poop. They do a great job, and our department I think is on a good track. But they're from a pedagogy background, so they're looking at the dollars and cents and see that our money comes from undergraduate teaching, and so they value that a lot more. But if you're looking at something like an engineering program, or even I remember my freshman year at Madison, there would be the professor on record for my course. I don't think I ever saw in my entire time there. It would be a teaching assistant prof, which is under the either associate or full prof, that would teach the lecture portion, and then PhD students or master students would teach the breakout discussion portions. And I mean, I've seen people with an R1 and another federal, like in the range of $500,000 to $600,000 grants not make tenure here. Whereas at like a UWL, if you publish like a paper a year, you're pretty much a stud.
yeah, and if you were to get a grant like that, you almost got a job for life at those kinds of institutions.
So Andy, thanks for explaining the R1 thing, because that was a question that was definitely going to come up, that I had, even because I wasn't sure what that meant. I just knew R1, you got a lot bigger things, a lot
Well,
more
then
money
you can even break
typically.
it down further by hard money and soft money R1 institutions. So like here, it's mostly hard money, meaning like say my advisor Nick Bird, in the Illinois budget, he's funded for whatever his salary is every year, especially now that he's made tenure. But there are places like Wash U, like Michigan, that are soft money institutions where, say, you bring in a tenure track prof, or even an assistant prof. Those people are responsible for finding their own funding. So if you don't get grants enough to fund your own salary, you're out. And so those are the real fight and die. I feel like those are the pinnacle of the publish or perish type paradigms. But we're lucky enough to have a hard money institution. Well, I was lucky enough to be at a hard money institution. AJ's lucky enough to be at a hard money, no undergraduate teaching institution. We'll say but there's a variety of different levels of this publish or perish paradigm. where I think the R1 soft money institutions are like insane. I won't name names. My buddy's postdoc advisor, he is one of the hardest working guys I know. Brazilian dude. He would be there before me in our lab, stay after me. It was his life, and he probably worked 12 hours a day. When he went to his postdoc, his advisor was there before him and stayed after him, even though she's a full prof, because they were at a soft money institution, and it's so important that like you're never safe at that point if you're soft money. Even if you make tenure, like you still find your own money.
Yep, not a position I would ever want to be in. It would just be a hard way to live year to year, especially when you get odd years like this with the federal funding world. That just makes it even scarier to be in those kinds of roles. And that, well, and I think, like you said, Andy, with the pinnacle of those types of positions, that's, I think, where the publisher perish term just got its name, where it's like you have so much pressure to pump out as much as you can from a publication standpoint, because it likely then feeds back and helps your grant applications and just makes you kind of a stronger researcher on paper. And I think probably, I don't know specifically within that episode that you originally listened to, but that's where it leads to, you know, unethical publishing practices where people are stealing data, or they're trying to, what used to be plagiarized, now it's probably all chat GPT based, where you're using AI based models to do your writing, or make up data now, where you again can fabricate data and literally fake a trial, fake data, and publishing fake stuff. And now I think, again, that probably is so much worse because of a combination of AI, but then also the lower quality and standards that you see in online publishing.
Well, even on the other side of it, I know of at least two professors here, again, not naming names, who like one of the, I mean, there are research ethics, and then like there are the perfect research ethics, and I don't think anyone follows perfect research ethics about publications. Perfect research ethics say no matter what, if you collect data, you publish it, especially with human subjects, because they experience risk. And one of the benefits is the greater knowledge to society. I know of a lot of professors, and two specifically here at a very well regarded R1, who won't publish negative findings solely because it hurts their ability to find money in the future, right? And NIH doesn't require it, FDA doesn't require it, USDA doesn't require publishing negative findings, all these things. So basically, our taxpayer dollars and all these really serious grants that give us clout and security that we compete for go to somebody, and they're not even required to tell you if the trial didn't work in the way they thought.
Yep.
And I think along those lines, what's super complicated, which I've only found out recently given my new enterprise, is FDA allows for what they call synthetic control arms now, which complicates things quite a bit, because you don't have to, like, it's not synthetic as in you make up individuals, but data you've collected from previous studies, if you can do like machine learning or advanced statistical modeling of those subjects as a control, they can be used as a theoretical control on top of a control group that you recruit and subject to the same intervention, placebo, or whatever, as whatever drug or intervention that you're testing, which makes the introduction of high level large language models even more complex, because now you have data collected from people that didn't sign up for the study, that are still valid to be used, but don't have any tie to that particular NCT, which is the clinical trial registration, being written about by people who are probably being augmented by some captive form of AI and it just becomes this mess of augmentation and previous data collection, and it's becoming somewhat impossible to follow. It used to be you'd get a paper and review, and you go, okay, NCT 1335078 9, click that, and you'd be like, oh, they changed it last second. Why'd you guys change it? They'd answer and be like, all right, but now there's so many more factors that can go into it.
And again, like on the back end, like you can get anything published, not anywhere, but you can get anything published somehow these days.
Shout out MDPI.
Yeah, with all the predatory journals and stuff that are out there, if you have enough money, you can get something published somewhere. It might not be a quality journal that people really in the know would respect, but it can get out there and get published, which also then complicates it to the untrained eye or the layperson who just says, "Oh, this is published. This has got to be good stuff," and they just take it. Yeah, and they take it for face value, or the media takes it and runs with it, not knowing if it's a vetted, true academic journal or not.
And the worst part about that is the vast majority of those journals are open access.
Yeah, and so
they're the only ones the lay people can access without paying $65 per article, unless they know about Sci-Hub. Sci-Hub, if anyone's listening, it's a great, awful resource that should be shut down, but it's called Sci-Hub. But yeah, the vast majority of those predatory journals are open access, and they're open access because they can charge. What is MDPI charging? 1,500 franc?
More than that nowadays. I'd say like 2,600 is probably the new norm.
Yeah. So you imagine these places are charging almost $3,000 USD. And even, they were talking about Nature submission fees and open access fees a while ago, where the submission fee was even going to be like $5 or $10,000, and open access was going to be 25 or 30 grand, which only means you have to budget for it on a federal grant. That federal grant now is basically mandated to pay that if they want those data to be publicly accessible, which means it costs us more and things become way more predatory and competitive. And it's this vicious cycle of accessibility versus cost. And for people that don't know, academic publishing is by far the highest markup product on the face of the planet. It's something like, what is it, like 1,500% markup for the cost of academic publications. Greg Nuggles talks about this a lot.
I'm sure.
It's insane. You have people write grants to get funding to run studies that don't really benefit themselves, maybe summer salary, who then write a paper. They have to pay for it to be submitted, and if it gets accepted, pay for it, paid charge. The people who review that paper don't get paid. The people who edit and are the editorial board of that paper, of that journal, don't get paid, and then they charge $60 to $100 for viewing.
It's a racket.
I'm glad I'm in the industry right now.
I remember talking to Carl too, like, can you imagine 40 years ago, like mailing your manuscript draft into the editor for them to review it, and then they mail you back something with like red ink all over it, and then you maybe run your
making your figures.
Yeah, run your stats on a slide rule, or you got to go down to the library and get the microfiche, like looking through the whatever microscope type thing to read those. And I just can't imagine publishing back then. Like, it had to be so much slower to go through.
My favorite thought on that line is like how, like, if nobody's ever had a letter to the editor, like it's part of the process, and it's a genuine part of science that should continue and is a great aspect. But at some level, when you get one on your papers, like you get a little hurt. Imagine getting a USPS certified letter to the editor, and you're like, what the hell?
Right. I've only gotten one.
I was on that.
The face mask one?
Nope, you got two then.
What was
We
the
got
other
one on that soccer paper because we didn't cite the guy's work.
Oh, yep. Yeah, that one was the other one was pretty good. They had some decent questions, and it was like you said, it was kind of a normal part of the process, and I did feel initially insulted, but then you kind of read it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I see their point, and then you kind of write up your response and send it back in.
We had one on that creatine paper.
Yeah, I remember that one though. That was a weird one.
Yeah. And what was he? The
I've
department
written
chair?
them, like I've seen a paper and gone, that's BS, and I've written a letter to the editor to call it out.
Anyways,
Just on
sorry,
that
we
topic.
derailed.
No, you're good. I think AJ brought up a thing, maybe this would be a good thing, kind of wrap the general discussion of it, because I think you guys have done a really good job of highlighting where all the pressures come from. But AJ, like when you were like, oh, that paper's BS, and wrote a letter to the editor, like what things, obviously you have had a lot of papers published, you read all this stuff for a living, essentially. So you've got a keener eye to it, but like what tips you off to be like, that just doesn't make sense, and like that you would say for like other people. And Andy, feel free to chime in on this too. I know for me personally, like I've read a bunch of research, but I used to be the one, self-admittedly, it's the intro, the discussion, the results, and then now it's still kind of that. But if I'm like, that intrigues me, I like really then dig into like what was actually done and if it actually makes sense or is actually like practical to something that I would want to do or apply. And if it's just seemingly not anything that's practical in the clinical world, it's like, okay, maybe we got to take this with a grain of salt because it's not going to be what we actually hope that it would be. But what are you looking for like as major like red flags for the BS that can come out because somebody wanted to get a publication out?
Well, even one of them was a creatine related one that led to a much bigger, way beyond the letter of the other. Is one of those common misconceptions papers that I was kind of a part of a writing group on, but it was centered on like some medical case series where they again lumped in like creatine that this patient had been taking, and they said that's what led to, I don't know if it was a stroke or a heart attack or whatever. And like the way they kind of tried to link creatine with all these other comorbidities or issues that happened to this person, and then like the explanations that they provided, it was like they essentially wrote a paper to tell you how little they know about biochemistry, endocrinology, cell biology. And it was like I was embarrassed for them that they would put their names on something like that and publish it. It's just like, what are you doing? Like none of this is right. And so it was one of the easiest letter to the editors, because you could just cite like a undergraduate science textbook and be like, we could start here with a discussion of why you're just embarrassingly wrong about like your description of this compound that again you just don't know anything about. And then there was another similar one centered on pre-workouts, and then claiming that again the caffeine content was too high. And it's like, if you convert the average caffeine content of most pre-workouts, like it's below the average coffee amount that people drink every single day. And so it's like, I agree, pre-workouts definitely could be dangerous. There's a lot of terrible crap that usually ends up in them, but it's not because they have too much caffeine in them. Similarly with like energy drinks, it's like most of them are below what people regularly consume every morning,
Right,
with your coffee habit. And so, yeah, there's definitely other things in those drinks and supplements that could be problematic, but don't distract it with like a invalid argument of focusing on the wrong thing.
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest thing I look for, I mean, the easiest thing that strikes me when I'm reading a paper that I'm immediately like, wait a second, is alternative ways of presenting data. So, like, if I see it used to fly all the time, like percent change or full change being the primary reported outcome, or just reporting p-value less than 0.05, no confidence intervals, no effect sizes. So, like, scanty reporting of data, or they were like a reporting percent change when it's not really appropriate. So there have been a few MPS papers that muscle protein synthesis papers that have come out reporting like percent change in muscle protein synthetic rates, which really isn't something the field does normally. Or the easiest way is to look at a clinical trial registry, which, if it wasn't pre-registered, doesn't conform to Declaration of Helsinki. And if it is pre-registered, seeing that the reported metrics or outcomes actually reflect um, the registry, and if they don't, try to figure out why. If there's something missing, a lot of times you'll find like which isn't necessarily bad, but it's good to know. You'll find a clinical trial registry that has like 4 conditions, and you'll see a paper published with control versus 1 condition. And you're like, well, I mean, technically that's not the most ethical thing to do. And it just makes you dig in a little bit deeper to see what's going on. I think the field's moving towards a much more open, and I think I've shouted them out before. GA Stork, the journal for the openness in kinesiology research. I think one of my buddies, Aaron, and Andy Kreitzer, were pretty or are pretty involved in that. Just trying to find journals that require you to demonstrate the rigor that should be expected amongst science at a high level, especially in something that's a health related field where it can be misinterpreted and legitimately cause detriment to the general population who doesn't have the knowledge to weed through this bullshit that we're talking about. But yeah, for me, it's statistics are the easiest way to point and shoot invalid approaches to research or trying to hide stuff. And then data presentation, like it's just common these days. You have to report at least 3 decimals for a p-value. If you don't report effect size, you have to report 95% confidence interval. And yeah, does it make the results section or a table look a little bit more cluttered? Of course. But I always think about, if somebody's running a meta-analysis moving forward from and needs data from one of my papers, if they can't take it from the raw publication, then I've done something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Anything else on this topic that you guys want to touch on before we wrap it up?
It's gonna be interesting to see where things go here. I feel like there's gonna be a tipping point with the open access model itself. I think already you see some institutions not even considering some publications from those journals as
like, yeah, University of Illinois doesn't consider MDPI anymore.
Yeah, it's like you may as well have written a magazine article. They would kind of treat it the same. And I could see that slowly working its way into, all kind of institutions or all tenure track portfolios where it's like you can't even use any of those materials. Certainly with
some of them just be blacklisted essentially.
Yeah, and if it's even like other ones that aren't indexed in PubMed, like where I'm at, they don't count those. So if I get a publication in a non-PubMed index journal, it's kind of like, nice, here's your high five, but don't include it in your citation because it's not going to mean anything. So, and then I think again, like the AI stuff too, holy cow, is that going to be hard to police in this world going forward? I don't know how you do. The referencing is the big red flag right now because that's not legit, but the writing part of it, I don't know.
Especially like I'm told to not speak specifically of what I'm doing. So in general, I have access to a captive form of AI really nicely. So basically, we have engineers that go through and tune it up to be more accurate, to have less, what do they call that, artifacts of like made up BS that the AI just came into fruition with. And I use it every day now. because I'm not in academia. I'm not trying to write papers and present data. I'm doing it to whatever. We have a list of variables. I'm like, what in the context of a clinical trial for this drug, what do you think these mean? And it spits out a list, and I'm like, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And it saves me 2 hours instead of going through 800 variables. I can just upload that sheet, and it gives me a pretty good approximation of what those variables mean. Of course, I need to fine tune it, but it's only going to get better. It's only going to get more indistinct from kind of the scientific writing style when we feed it more data.
Yeah.
And I think writing legitimately is going to become less valuable. I think the actual conducting of high level and high rigor clinical trials is going to be where it's at. I had this conversation with kind of a me people, a redneck dude at a bar. We were shooting pool. He's a plumber, a union plumber, and he was talking about AI. And it's the first time I really thought about it. I'm like, you know what? I think at the end of the day, if you can do shit, you're gonna be fine. If you have to know shit, you're probably gonna have to move on.
Yeah. Like the guy you're talking to, he's gonna be having a job forever. There's no AI model that can fix a toilet like that.
It can diagnose the issue, but somebody has to be there to crimp the pecs or to solder copper joints.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to break it down. I like that. If you can do stuff, you'll be fine. Yeah, even just like the basic chat GPT is still helpful. And it's not even the Cadillac of those models.
Yeah, we have
that's the truth.
Captive form of, I think, chat GPT 4, and it's like insane.
I used it today. I meant to do this ahead of time, but I was scrambling before X-Phys class, and I was planning on doing a quiz game. Literally prompted ChatGPT, can you create a Jeopardy style quiz game for an undergraduate exercise physiology course? Here's how many columns, here's how many questions, here's how I want the points. And like, again, within seconds, it created the entire game for me as I was walking to class from my car. I did it on my phone as I was en route. Literally got there and pulled it up from my email, and bam, had the whole game laid out. And I made sure to like double check the answer before I would kind of, give them the points or whatever, and everything was spot on.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Well, all right, fellas. It was great to connect again. Thank you for your insight on this. The preview, I think our next topic, we were thinking about laying out some discussion on expertise and what we consider in that and how it'll tie pretty nicely into this one, I think, but just for all the things out on the interwebs out there. So we will be back in theory in a month-ish. We'll just give ourselves the ish, which I feel like is a 2-week buffer. So it could be 4 weeks, it could be 6. Probably not going to be 2. But we will take it from there.
All right. That's what we're playing.
All right. Good to see you both.
Likewise.
See you.